I'm good. Looks like we both decided it was cold today or something.
Amazing, given that we are on opposite sides of the country.
True enough. Now, if I'm recalling correctly, last week we were talking about cash flow, and this week we wanted to talk about
Yes,
profitability.
we do. Where is it leaking in your business? And I have some surprising places where profit actually leaks.
I'm pretty sure, at least I'm hoping you're going to come out with one of my favorite terms. It starts with random. Now, I know earlier in our series, we did talk about the tech stack. I think it's
Yeah.
worthwhile talking one more time and saying tech stack bloat is truly
Oh,
something that a lot of businesses struggle with, especially as more AI, more tools,
mhm.
and roadmaps continue forward. We don't always go back and look at our tech stack enough and say, hey, do I truly need that thing? Oh, when is that due? Is that an annual or a monthly payment? And some of these pieces. Oh, is that going to, how many seats am I buying in that particular tool? Because that tends
Yeah.
to be how SaaS tools are priced.
Yeah. Yeah. The number of seats is bloat. The stack itself, and like they're the obvious ones, right? They're the obvious ones, and we talked before about doing this more than once a year, but looking at what's all the technology you're paying for, canceling the things you're not actually using that you don't actually need, right? So that's one. It's the obvious one. But you said something really interesting right there, which is overbought technology.
Yeah.
And I have seen this a number of times with, and actually, I'm going to say there are two, and they are opposite sides of the same coin:
Tell me more.
overbought technology and underbought technology. So, overbought
Okay.
technology happens when you need, I mean, basically, you need a minivan and you've gone out and bought a Lamborghini. And so you're paying all the upkeep on the Lamborghini and the high insurance and the spend, and all you really need is a minivan to get to soccer practice, right? You've overbought. You're paying for a bunch of stuff you don't need. I see this happen a lot with my agency clients, right? Because oftentimes with agencies, when you're working with a particular CRM software, they'll give you some kind of a deal on use because they want you to use their software and they know you don't need it, right? No agency, unless you're, an Omnicom super agency, needs the full HubSpot enterprise suite, right? You basically need Pipedrive and MailChimp cobbled together with some good automation. That's what you need. But in order to learn the tool, you got to be able to use it. So you'll get these licenses. Well, then, fast forward a little bit, maybe you're not, the reseller program changes or what have you. All of a sudden, you're paying, four times what you need to for your tech stack. And so I see that happen a lot where companies will purchase something um, that they believe they need. And then the reality is over time that starts to kind of bleed. Software adds features, all of a sudden, what was a good CRM is now an enterprise resource planning system with customer service. And it's just way too much. You just don't need it. And the price has gone up as well, right? So that's one. But the other one, and I think everybody knows that, that's the obvious, right? If I'm paying for software and it's too, that's obvious. But the other one that I see is companies that don't invest in their tech stack,
Sure.
right? And so it's, oh, well, I can get this tool that does everything I need, or I can get this tool that does about a third of what I need. And then I can bolt on this tool, and then I can bolt on this tool. And what they see is the bottom line price of the tech stack, but they don't account for the productivity loss from their team. They don't account for the integration errors between all those platforms and the hard financial losses that can come from that, as well as the productivity loss that comes from that. They don't account for the way it impacts the morale of their people, where they're, typing the same thing. Nobody wants to go type, retype, you know, people lose interest in tasks like that. We know that humans actually, our brains go, okay, and they stop paying attention. So I think underbought technology is actually a bigger profit leak in a business because it reduces the productivity of your people. And it's interesting. I mean, we're in Canada, and I hear a lot of oh, productivity in Canada has gone down, and workers get all up in arms. They're like, I'm working more hours than I've ever worked. I'm working harder than I've ever worked. But you know what Canadian businesses are known to be very reluctant to do? Invest in tech. And
Automation.
so, you can give somebody a spoon and tell them to go dig a hole so that you can build a building. And they can dig with that spoon 8 hours a day, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. The worker is being very productive, but the productivity is absolutely nothing. It would be if you gave them a backhoe.
It's interesting. We didn't mean to talk about this today, but there's a very big difference between our Canadian clients and our US clients.
Yes,
And
huge.
it's fascinating, really. I mean, I love talking about the differences from a geographic standpoint, and I also love talking
Yeah,
about the difference from generational standpoint. Who's willing to adopt different tools and tech, and who's just willing to go, I did it this way all the time, and it was just fine. And,
yeah,
and you're right. The roadmaps that different companies have, what was a great tool once upon a time, or three tools once upon a time, now you may only need to have one tool. Um, all of those things need to be reevaluated on a very regular basis. And the
yeah,
documentation of the SOPs, because I like to talk about key man risk, is
yep.
also critical. And so there's some really interesting elements that feed into all of these pieces.
There are. There are. I mean, we think of profit as being this really simple, I bought 10 widgets for $10 a widget and I'm selling them for $20 a widget. So I have this margin of $10 a widget. But in reality, profit is a much more nuanced piece. And I think when we're planning our forecast, in fact, there's a great book out. I believe it's by Mike Michalowicz, Profit First. It's been
Yeah,
out for
profit
a while.
first.
Profit
Mike
First.
Michalowicz.
Yeah. That, that ethos is one that more business owners like, what is the profit that I need to make in my business in order for it to be worth me sustaining the risk of running this company? Right. And that's going to be a different number for everybody. There's just so many factors, but that's a question I think more businesses need to really answer and then plan towards that goal rather than planning towards a revenue goal,
Yeah.
right? We plan towards revenue, but we don't think about what the profit looks like at the end of the year. And you'll hear, and again, this is more in services, but it can happen as well in production based businesses where there are certain areas of production, where it actually reduces profit, right? There is, if you're in services, it's quite simple. I mean, you're generally looking to get your people to around 80%. If your people are billable 80% of their time, you're pushing up against a capacity and you need to open up capacity, right? But as soon as you open up capacity, nobody's billable 80% of the time, but you still have all the overhead costs for them to be billable 80%. So your profit goes down. Same happens with production, where if you have to scale up to increase your capacity in the plant, the cost of doing that generally lands long before the orders come in to fulfill that new capacity. You look like you have something you want to say.
It's an interesting planning exercise when
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to figure out what to invest in,
Yeah.
what to cut, what's the profit margin you're going to want to keep, what's the profit margin you're at currently. How do
Yeah.
you get to point A to point B? Because profit first is a really great conversation to have, because one of the base premises of profit first is that as an owner, you actually take time to, I don't know, pay yourself. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
owners, I know it's not often talked about, but a lot of owners don't actually get a lot of money out of their businesses unless they're a solopreneur or they're much bigger organizations. There's this messy
Yep.
middle piece that's really challenging, and you have to be mindful of the profitability of your business and looking at where the leakage happens and how the planning takes place for resources, whether it be people, tech stacks, whatever it is. And so it makes for very interesting conversations.
Yeah. There's another one that I It's actually one of my uh, pee under the mattress, major irritants in my world, random acts of marketing.
I love it. I'm so glad you said that. That's the one I was hoping you were going to hit was random
Oh,
acts of marketing.
you know, I the thing about a lot of business owners and a lot of business leaders is not that they don't have great ideas about how to market their business. It's that they have too many. And without a process to kind of whittle that down around some specific objectives, and I mean objectives that are tied to business goals, that are tied to your profit goal, that are tied to your future vision goal, like really connecting the dots in all those places, very quickly, what ends up happening is that your team starts to engage in random acts of marketing. And that's like when you get a call, you're the marketing director and you get a call from the boss going, "Hey, I think we should attend this conference. Can you make that happen?" Click.
No, no one's ever seen that.
Or I got this thing for an ad in this like trade ag magazine and we need to do an advertorial. Can you make that happen? The deadline's Friday. Click. And so you have these, opportunities that arise. It's like, oh, that looks good. Oh, that looks good. Oh, that looks good. There's nothing tying all that together, right? Random acts of marketing. Um, oh, we have to do our newsletter. What are we going to do this month? Let's pick something. Random acts of marketing. Whereas if you have a messaging plan laid out, you have clear positioning, you have um, clear brand standards and guidelines. I mean, these are all things that people are like, oh, we don't need those. Oh, that's for big companies. No, they are the building blocks of becoming that big company. You lay these pieces out, then you make decisions. So when that sponsorship opportunity comes in, the question you're asking, the question your marketing person should be asking you is, how does this tie to our goals? Which of our goals are we measuring success of this initiative against? How does it tie in? Why are you suggesting this relative to our bigger goals? And a great example are clients I've had that have gone into to home shows. In the construction area, in the commercial landscaping, whatever it might be, and they've gone into home shows to promote their business. Except it's a home show, and the people coming through are by and large homeowners who don't necessarily need a commercial landscaper. And so the investment in that show probably could be better allocated somewhere else, right? It's, and maybe not, maybe it's a home show for people who live in an area that is very much staffed with commercial property owners. But not looking at those pieces, right? Are your clients going to be in the room? I had a client who did a lot of speaking engagements, tons of them, but they weren't getting them anything. We sat down and we looked at the speaking engagements. And it's like, you're speaking every time you get up on a stage, you're talking to your competitors. You're educating your competitors. Your clients aren't in this room. And so we started evaluating every engagement. Are the clients in the room? And when
It's a
I
really
will say,
important question. Are the clients in the room when you're
right,
doing these hopefully non-random acts of marketing?
right. And it can be easy to get caught up in it, right? But I will tell you, every single client that I have worked with, Susan, every single one, um, has found that they actually don't need to spend as much on marketing as they thought in terms of their external investment.
Yeah.
And we've been able to reconfigure that investment so that they are getting more value from those dollars by just, frittering less away. And so we start to pull in budgets that felt out of control, but I have to do it. So pulling those in, now there's a lot more discretionary spend that actually funds less random acts of marketing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you have to ask, it doesn't matter whether it's a marketing spend or it's something else.
Mm.
You have to ask the right questions when you are evaluating it and you're looking at things historically in order to plan going forward. Because we started this conversation talking about profit leakage. And
Yeah.
so these random acts of marketing, which hopefully we don't do because we've learned from the past. And to truly ask good quality questions on a regular basis, make a plan, and then actually execute on that plan and learn from it. It's
Yeah.
not just a
And
profit leakage, it's also good strategy.
I want to be really clear. The profit leakage in the business isn't from investing in marketing. And I think a lot of times that's the, oh, this didn't work, so we're just not gonna make the investment, right? We're just not gonna spend the money, right? But that's like going to a restaurant and ordering a dish, and you're like, oh, I didn't really like that dish. I'm never gonna eat again. Eventually you're gonna starve to death. And the same is true with your marketing, right? So the profit leakage in random marketing doesn't come from the the money that you've spent, because the reality is you should have spent that money. It's how you spend the money and what you get back in terms of your return is between a good spend and a bad spend. And so with marketing, I think it's really what you're spending, your leak is coming from the opportunity cost, the
When you just
opportunity
brought up
cost to
something,
have gained a client.
sorry, you just brought something really important up. How many leaders, when they're doing planning or they're thinking about an investment in their business, take the time to do an ROI calculation, whatever the ROI needs to be,
Yeah.
depending on the spend, the investment, the activity. That can be a different calculation,
Yeah.
but do we actually know it? Do we actually meet that? Do we actually think about it?
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the challenges, especially with marketing, I mean, sales is pretty straightforward, right? We have a pipeline. Are people closing at each stage of the pipeline? It's a very numeric, real time now piece. Marketing ROI forecasting is much more nuanced because you plant the seed in April, but you don't get the harvest till October. And so one of the huge mistakes, and actually this is one of the contributing factors to random acts of marketing, is we don't sufficiently account for time lag in the business. And so we plant the seeds in April, and in May we're jumping up and down demanding sales, right? Where's my harvest? Where's my harvest? Where's my harvest? Well, this didn't work, I'm going to go do something else. And so we rip up all the seeds. I mean, imagine if a farmer did this. Oh, I haven't got any carrots yet. Ripping up carrots for planting alfalfa. 3 weeks later, I don't see any alfalfa in them fields. We're ripping it up. We're planting corn. You get to October, you haven't got a crop, right? But that's one of the contributing factors. So really it's about adjusting not just for the numbers, but also for how long it's going to take for whatever you're doing today to actually have an impact and being cognizant of that. And that's hard. I mean, I've spent my career in marketing and I find it incredibly difficult to be patient. I need people behind me going, patience. I know it's not a virtue you possess. Patience. Yeah. And not in a hospital, like patience. But there's one other that I would love for us to talk to before we run out of time today, and we are almost out of time. And that is the impact of leadership drag on your company's profit, and how leadership drag can um, be one of those hidden places where profit leaks, right? Opportunity to grow the business leaks. When you miss an opportunity to grow, you've lost profit, right? Because oftentimes that growth might have been net almost entirely to the bottom line because your expenses, in a lot of cases are fixed. So I'd love to hear from you on that. What you think, in terms of leadership, and where are some of the places leaders actually are sources of profit leak in a business, because that you can control.
Well, it's an interesting one to talk about because leadership has such a massive impact on all of that. I think that you know, there's a sweet spot between I really want to make the decision quickly and I need to get
Yeah.
all the information, analysis paralysis. And so that drag and that component there is quite important and quite critical. I do know we're at the end of our time
Yes.
today, and gosh darn it, again, my goodness. Um, we are heading into 2026 very soon, so we
Yeah.
should probably, wish everyone a happy new year, even though it's not
Yeah.
officially the New Year Day.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Happy 2026. Let's hope for a prosperous and what is the word I am looking for? I want to say uneventful 2026. Calmer
Less
waters.
eventful than 2025.
Yeah, calmer waters in 2026. And you know what, Susan, when we get together again, let's talk about that leadership engine because I
Yes.
mean, I think that is a critical one, especially, joking aside, I think we're probably looking at another chaotic year. There's a lot still changing in the world. That leadership engine is going to be the key piece that's going to steer you through.
It's going to be very important.
All
Well, thank
right.
you for joining us, everybody.